We all have demons, parts of ourselves that we don't like to acknowledge, but we see lurking inside of us. We all have that little voice in our ear telling us to do things that we kind of know are going to sabotage us. We get high or go gambling much to try to forget or ignore those demons. We distract ourselves from our demons with work or competition. But no matter how hard we try to ignore our demons, they're always down there. They're always lurking. Here's how it works. Demons start out as self-judgment. You're lazy, you're stupid, you're unlovable. And then we try our hardest to avoid that judgment, to prove it wrong. But eventually that avoidance becomes self-destructive and worse. No matter how much you try to prove your demon wrong, it doesn't go away. In fact, it just doubles down and gets stronger. In this way, our demons morph into a kind of self-loathing. You feel powerless and trapped. You can't win. No matter how much you succeed, you can't prove the demon wrong. And yet when you give up and fail, you just prove them right. In the book Feeding Your Demons, Soltram Alioni talks about an old Tibetan Buddhist meditation practice where you literally visualize whatever the demon is haunting you, and then sit down and look at them, the same way you'd feed a guest or a friend at a dinner party. Alioni argues that this has a healing effect, that it represents accepting the worst aspects of us, and then developing compassion for it. Sometimes the best thing about people is also the worst thing about them. That's because our extraordinarily positive traits often produce extraordinarily negative side effects or sacrifices. Constant guilt around being lazy is just the flip side of having enormous energy and ambition. To give up on one would mean to give up on both. In this sense, every demon has an associated angel, and our demons are just the other side of our best qualities. To give up on one would be to give up on both. To put it in another way, whatever you choose to value in your life, you are also choosing to experience the failure of that value. Talking about entitlement, the assumption that we deserve special treatment or better results than everyone else. This drive to disassociate from our demons is a subtle form of entitlement. It's an assumption or belief that we should be able to live without cost or sacrifice. An offshoot of that assumption is often the belief that our pain is somehow special or unique to us, that no one understands what we're going through or no one can relate to what it's like to be us or have our problems. But here's the hard truth that we all need to hear. There's nothing special about your demons. Everyone faces demons at some point, so we don't have to be ashamed of them. It means that we're human, that there's not actually anything unique or special about our problems. Now, it's important to note, befriending the demon isn't necessarily agreeing with the demon, and it's definitely not the same thing as indulging the demon. An alcoholic isn't made better by drinking more alcohol. That just feeds the addiction. You are allowed to have a couple lazy days here and there. That doesn't mean you a horrible person. The famous psychoanalyst Carl Jung wrote about the shadow self. For Jung, your shadow is all of the parts of yourself that you despise or loathe and therefore hide and avoid. Much like a shadow, it's this dark image that follows you around wherever you go, always behind you, always attached to you. It's impossible to run away or lose your shadow because ultimately your shadow is a representation of you. It's a beautiful metaphor because no shadow can exist without a source of light. To rid yourself of your shadow would require you to rid yourself of the light in your life, and thus live in utter darkness. Jung saw that denying our shadows and everything they contain was a source of a great deal of human suffering, and even argued that violence and full-on wars within and between societies were often the sad result of denying our collective shadow. As a culture, we avoid and deny the worst parts of ourselves, and we wage war on ourselves, threatening and killing our most desperate and vulnerable. We avoid and distract ourselves from our own problems by meddling in the problems of other cultures and society. Jung argued that we must integrate our shadow into ourselves by turning towards the darkness, not away from it. That means embracing the dark aspects of ourselves, our worst impulses, our worst shame, our worst fears, and owning them. Accept them as they are. But with that acceptance is also a respectful disagreement. Because you can't have light without dark, and you can't truly value something unless you also value the lack of that. You can't strive to achieve great success if you aren't also a little paranoid about failure. You can't desire wonderful relationships if you aren't also a little terrified of losing that person. So be nice to your demons.